The royal family has always been a world of tradition, glittering crowns, and unspoken rules that govern who rises and who is left in the shadows. But what happens when those rules collide with modern life, ambition, and raw emotion? Today, we peel back the gilded curtains and reveal a story that has shaken Buckingham Palace to its core, a story of titles, betrayal, and a father's explosive reaction that no one could have predicted. Imagine this. Prince George, barely a child, is granted a royal title that instantly secures his place in history, while Archie and Lilibet, the offspring of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, receive nothing. Nothing. It might sound like a minor ceremonial detail to some, but in the corridors of power within the monarchy, titles are far more than labels. They are status, privilege, and protection. And when they are distributed unevenly, emotions run hotter than a midsummer royal garden in full bloom. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. From the outside, it may appear to the public as just another headline. Prince George receives title, Archie's left out. But the story beneath those words is explosive. Prince Harry, a man who has spent years navigating the tightrope between family duty and personal freedom, reportedly went nuts upon hearing the news. But why? What drove him to the edge? What whispers, old rivalries, and unspoken resentments suddenly came to the surface? In this video, we will dive deep into the royal dynamics that set the stage for this unprecedented reaction, uncovering moments of tension, moments of betrayal, and moments that reveal just how human and vulnerable these figures are behind the pomp and ceremony. Picture the scene in your mind. The palace corridors, the echo of footsteps on marble floors, the hushed conversations, the subtle nods and careful smiles. Every gesture is weighted with meaning. Every pause is a calculation. In this delicate world, even the smallest slight can feel like a thunderclap. When George's title was announced, that thunderclap reached the ears of Prince Harry in Los Angeles, thousands of miles away. And from there, it only grew louder. Why does this matter so much now? Because titles aren't just ceremonial. They symbolize a connection, a recognition, and, in many ways, a hierarchy. And when one branch of the family is honored while another is sidelined, emotions flare. Questions arise. Is this fair? Is this tradition? Or is this a signal of deeper fractures in the royal family, a subtle message that says, you may be outside the palace gates, but your children are not entirely welcome? And this isn't just about Harry. This story ripples through the lives of everyone involved. Meghan Markle, whose marriage to Harry redefined modern royalty. Queen Elizabeth's legacy, which is steeped in centuries of rigid tradition. King Charles, who now has to navigate a family landscape far more complicated than most would imagine. Behind every headline, there is tension, strategy, and sometimes heartbreak. Now, let's pause for a moment and consider Archie and Lilibet. Imagine being children, largely shielded from the glare of public life, yet having your very identity defined by decisions made in stately rooms thousands of miles away. Titles can protect you. Titles can grant privileges. And yet, for them, the palace door remained partially closed. The exclusion is not just symbolic. It carries weight, perception, and potentially resentment that could echo through generations. And for a father like Harry, who has spent years fighting for recognition and equality, this omission isn't merely bureaucratic. It's deeply personal. Here's the twist. This isn't the first time royal titles have sparked outrage or deep family tension. History is filled with rivalries, public spats, and whispered conflicts that only come to light decades later through letters, memoirs, or investigative revelations. But rarely has a situation escalated so quickly, so publicly, and with such emotional intensity as this one. It's a rare glimpse into a world that is usually polished, curated, and distant. And yet, in this story, the human side of royalty, the anger, the jealousy, the protectiveness, comes through vividly, unfiltered. But what exactly did Harry do? How did he respond? Reports suggest his reaction was visceral, raw, and uncharacteristically unrestrained. And that's where our story begins in earnest, with a man confronting the system he was born into, the family he loves, and the rules that suddenly feel outdated, unfair, and, in his eyes, unjust. His response wasn't just about titles. It was about recognition, equality, and a father's fierce desire to protect his children. We'll also explore the ripple effects of this announcement, how it impacted Meghan, how it reverberated through the palace staff, and how it ignited conversations that were meant to remain private. The clash between tradition and modernity has never been more pronounced, and in this episode, you'll witness firsthand the moments that reveal the fragility and complexity of even the most secure dynasties. Imagine being in Harry's shoes. The world watches you, judges you, sometimes unfairly. You make life-altering decisions to protect your family, only to be met with reminders of a hierarchy you can't easily bend. And then, you hear that your eldest son is being honored with a title that your own children will not receive. How would you feel? Shocked? Betrayed? Furious? All of it at once. This is the emotional whirlwind that this story captures, a moment of tension that's as human as it is historic. By the end of this video, you'll understand why this is more than a news story. It's a story about fathers and sons, mothers and daughters, and a family navigating the impossible expectations of legacy and modernity. You'll see how every decision, no matter how ceremonial it seems, carries consequences that ripple far beyond the palace walls. And we'll leave you with a revelation so striking, so unexpected, that it changes everything you thought you knew about this royal family drama. But here's the mini cliffhanger that sets the stage for everything to come. While George celebrated a milestone that would make his grandfather beam with pride, Harry's next move, the one that would shock both the royal family and the public alike, was quietly brewing. A response fueled not by strategy, but by raw, unfiltered emotion. And what came next would change the tone of royal discourse forever, and no one saw it coming. The drama is just beginning. The tensions are simmering. And the story of Prince Harry, Prince George, Archie, and Lilibet is about to unfold in ways that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about monarchy, fairness, and family loyalty. The question we leave you with now is simple, yet loaded. When tradition collides with modern expectations, who wins? And who is left behind? Stay with us, because the answer is coming, and it's not what anyone expected. It all started with a single headline. A seemingly simple announcement, yet one that sent shockwaves through royal circles across the globe. Prince George, the eldest son of Prince William and Catherine, Duchess of Cambridge, was officially granted a royal title. For most casual observers, it might have seemed like routine protocol, a ceremonial nod to tradition. But in the intricate web of the British monarchy, nothing is ever routine. Nothing is ever simple. And certainly nothing is ever just about a title. Let's set the scene. The palace, an architectural marvel standing proudly through centuries, has seen it all: coronations, weddings, scandals, and quiet family disputes that never see the light of day. But this particular announcement, simple on paper, had layers of meaning and consequence that few outside the inner sanctum could fully grasp. For George, it was an honor, a mark of recognition, a legacy cemented before his 7th birthday. But for Harry, on the other side of the Atlantic, thousands of miles away, it was a blow, one that touched raw nerves he thought he had kept under control. Prince Harry's reaction was immediate and intense. Sources close to him describe a man who went nuts, not in a reckless, uncontrolled way, but in a torrent of emotion that combined frustration, disbelief, and fierce protectiveness for his own children. To understand why, we need to dig deeper into the history of royal titles, the unspoken rules that govern them, and the personal journey Harry has endured over the past decade. Royal titles are far more than ceremonial labels. They are symbols of privilege, responsibility, and status within an institution that has existed for over 1,000 years. When George received his title, it wasn't just a formality. It was a public declaration. He belongs. He is officially recognized. He is next in line to inherit centuries of tradition. And for Harry, who has fought to carve out a life outside the constraints of that tradition, the omission of Archie and Lilibet felt like a stark reminder of the boundaries that still exist. Boundaries he cannot cross, no matter how much he has challenged the monarchy from afar. The contrast could not have been more striking. On one side, a child raised in London, groomed from birth for royal life, showered with public affection and ceremonial honor. On the other, two children living across the ocean, partially outside the traditional royal framework, seemingly invisible in the eyes of tradition when it came to this particular recognition. The fairness gap, real or perceived, was glaring. And Harry's reaction was fueled by more than just parental instinct. It was a clash of values, identity, and loyalty. But let's rewind for a moment. Harry's journey to this moment has been anything but ordinary. From his earliest days, he was aware of the expectations placed upon him. The scrutiny, the formalities, the need to behave as a prince despite the ordinary joys and struggles of childhood. Yet, unlike George, Harry chose a path that was unconventional, controversial, and, to many within the palace, unsettling. He married an American actress, Meghan Markle, and together they stepped back from official royal duties, seeking a life where they could raise their children on their own terms. Their choice was bold, revolutionary, and deeply polarizing. So when George's title was announced, the emotional stakes for Harry were enormous. This wasn't just a ceremonial update in the family's official hierarchy. This was a tangible reminder that, despite everything he had done to protect and provide for Archie and Lilibet, tradition still favored those who remained within the palace system. It was a personal, almost visceral jab, and Harry's reaction reflected that. The intensity of his response surprised many. Unlike publicized disputes, this moment was raw, private, and unfiltered. Witnesses described conversations, texts, and calls filled with exclamations of disbelief, questions of fairness, and fierce declarations of parental loyalty. This was a man who had spent years carefully navigating media narratives and public perception, and yet, in this instance, emotion took the lead. And it wasn't just anger. There was a profound sense of hurt. A feeling that, despite his efforts and sacrifices, his children were being denied recognition solely because of their unconventional position in the family hierarchy. The contrast between George and his own children became painfully evident. One child celebrated, while the others were overlooked. And for Harry, who has long sought to shield his family from the pressures and prejudices of royal life, the sting was personal. What made this moment even more explosive was the public perception. The announcement, though formal, was widely circulated by media outlets around the world. Social media erupted, debates ignited, and speculation about the royal family's internal dynamics reached fever pitch. And through it all, Harry's frustration simmered. How could something so significant be overlooked? How could tradition so blatantly favor one line of children over another? At the heart of this story lies a question that has haunted the monarchy for centuries. What truly defines fairness in a system rooted in history and hierarchy? Is it enough to follow the rules as written, or must those rules adapt to modern values of equality, representation, and inclusion? For Harry, the answer was painfully clear. The system had failed his children. And then came the crucial turning point. While the palace continued its public celebration of George's milestone, Harry began plotting a response. Not a reckless outburst, but a considered, deliberate action fueled by the desire to assert his family's place in a world that had seemed to exclude them. And it's here that the story takes a dramatic turn. What happens when a prince refuses to remain silent? When tradition meets rebellion, and personal loyalty clashes with centuries of protocol. Before we move forward, let's pause and consider the emotional stakes. This isn't just about titles. It's about recognition, identity, and the right to belong. It's about a father watching the system he once embraced fail to honor his children. It's about a family navigating a world of rules that are both rigid and arbitrary. And it's about the consequences, both public and private, that arise when emotions run high in the gilded halls of royalty. The moment Harry learned of George's royal title, it wasn't just a ripple, it was a tidal wave. Sources close to him describe a mixture of disbelief, anger, and frustration that seemed to come from years of suppressed emotion suddenly boiling over. This was a man who had spent the better part of a decade trying to navigate the complex web of royal etiquette, public scrutiny, and media intrusion. And yet, in this moment, all of that preparation felt meaningless. His reaction was raw, unfiltered, and shockingly intense. Imagine it. Harry, thousands of miles away from London, pacing in the sprawling rooms of his California estate, phone in hand, eyes darting across the screen, rereading the announcement. How could this happen? George, barely a school-age child, suddenly elevated with a royal title, while his own children, Archie and Lilibet, remained unrecognized. The fairness gap felt like a personal affront, as if the monarchy itself were sending a message. You may be outside the family structure, but your children are not entirely welcome. And for a man who had fought tirelessly to protect his family's autonomy, that message stung deep. Sources reveal that Harry initially attempted to process his emotions privately. He reached out to Meghan, his confidant and partner, in a flurry of texts and calls. The conversation reportedly combined disbelief, righteous anger, and a fierce protectiveness for their children. "How could they do this to our kids?" he allegedly demanded. "They're just as royal as George." This wasn't simply parental indignation. It was the collision of modern values with centuries-old traditions. What makes this episode even more fascinating is how it exposed the hidden tensions between Harry and other members of the royal family. While he had publicly stepped back from royal duties, his ties to the monarchy remained emotionally and symbolically strong. The announcement of George's title was a subtle reminder that, despite distance, the old hierarchy and expectations still governed who was recognized and who was overlooked. For Harry, the omission of Archie and Lilibet wasn't just unfair, it was emblematic of a system that he believed needed reform. At the same time, palace insiders were abuzz. The announcement, intended to celebrate George, had unintended consequences. Senior aides reportedly scrambled to manage the fallout, concerned that Harry's reaction might become public and generate another media firestorm. And in the royal world, perception is everything. One misstep, one overheard comment, and centuries of carefully maintained reputation could unravel. The tension in the corridors of Buckingham Palace was palpable. Staff whispered, advisors debated, and the question on everyone's mind was, how far would Harry go? It's important to understand why this moment struck such a chord. Harry's journey has always been shaped by contrasts: privilege versus expectation, love versus duty, and independence versus loyalty. He had grown up under the intense scrutiny of the public eye, navigating his own father's absence, media pressures, and a desire to forge a unique path. When he married Meghan and stepped back from official royal life, it was both a liberation and a defiance of the very system that now seemed to exclude his children from recognition. George's title wasn't just a ceremonial honor. It was a reminder that the rules had shifted in ways Harry found unacceptable. The intensity of Harry's response was compounded by the timing. The announcement came during a period of heightened sensitivity within the royal family. Previous conflicts, some public and some private, had already strained relationships. Tensions between Harry and William, between Meghan and other senior royals, and between the older and younger generations were bubbling just beneath the surface. The news of George's title acted like a match in a powder keg. Suddenly, years of unspoken grievances ignited. What's more, Harry's reaction didn't occur in isolation. Meghan, fiercely protective of their children, reportedly supported him entirely, reinforcing his belief that Archie and Lilibet deserved equal recognition. Their conversations reflected shared frustration. Why should one child be celebrated while the others are overlooked? Why should centuries-old tradition dictate recognition in a family that was trying to redefine what royalty meant in the modern age? Together, they began considering strategies to address the perceived injustice, both privately and in ways that could influence public perception. Behind the palace walls, the response was a mix of confusion and concern. Advisors debated whether Harry's reaction should be addressed quietly or publicly. Some argued that he needed to be managed to prevent another media scandal. Others recognized that his grievances were legitimate. After all, the public often sympathizes with the underdog, and Harry had positioned himself as a protector of his children. These conflicting perspectives only heightened the drama, creating an atmosphere thick with anticipation. What would Harry do next? And then came the whispers of action. According to sources, Harry began taking steps that were subtle but deliberate. He reached out to media contacts, seeking opportunities to share his perspective without appearing vindictive. He engaged with allies who could influence public opinion. And most importantly, he began preparing his children for a world where recognition might not come automatically, teaching Archie and Lilibet about resilience, fairness, and the complex dynamics of family legacy. These actions, though quiet, marked a turning point. Harry was no longer just reacting emotionally. He was strategically positioning himself and his family for what he perceived as the inevitable fallout. What makes this chapter particularly compelling is how it highlights the clash between public image and private emotion. On paper, the announcement of George's title seemed straightforward, almost mundane. But for Harry, it touched every nerve: his identity as a father, his sense of fairness, and his enduring connection to the monarchy. The emotions were raw, the stakes were high, and the consequences were unpredictable. And in the royal system, unpredictability is dangerous. But perhaps the most shocking element was the intensity of Harry's determination. Reports suggest he refused to accept the situation quietly, believing that Archie and Lilibet's exclusion was not merely an oversight, but a deliberate message. His anger, while personal, became a public concern the moment it leaked through private channels. And as we all know, in the age of social media and 24-hour news cycles, private emotions have a way of becoming global headlines almost instantaneously. The palace thought it had contained the situation. After all, George's title announcement was intended to be a celebratory milestone, a nod to tradition, and a story that would quietly slip into the archives of royal history. But Harry had other plans. The man who had spent years balancing public perception with private conviction was now poised to make a move that would shake both the royal institution and the media machine that thrives on every royal whisper. What exactly did he do? At first glance, it seemed subtle: a private call here, a carefully worded email there. But insiders confirmed that Harry's strategy was anything but passive. He reached out to trusted journalists, media contacts, and allies who had supported his vision of modernized royalty. The message was clear, though never explicitly stated. The world needed to know that Archie and Lilibet had been excluded from recognition, and that this was not merely an oversight but a symptom of a system that still clung to outdated hierarchies. And the media, hungry as ever, jumped at the chance. Overnight, headlines exploded. Prince George celebrated while Archie and Lilibet left out, and Harry furious over royal titles snub. The story spread across continents, igniting debates, social media storms, and fierce discussions in households around the globe. For Harry, the reaction was both a victory and a double-edged sword. He had drawn attention to the disparity, but now he was also under intense scrutiny. Every word, every action, every reaction dissected in public view. To understand the magnitude of this moment, consider the stakes. This wasn't just about personal pride or parental frustration. Harry had built a public persona as a protector of fairness, equality, and family. By taking action, he reinforced that persona, but he also risked inflaming old rivalries and stirring resentment among senior royals who valued discretion, protocol, and loyalty above all else. The question on everyone's mind was, would this be another chapter of reconciliation, or the spark that ignited a new family feud? Insiders reveal that Harry's communications were carefully curated. He was strategic, ensuring that while the world knew of the snub, the narrative also portrayed his children as deserving recognition, innocent in the conflict, and emblematic of a modern royal family struggling to reconcile tradition with progress. And Meghan's influence was evident throughout. Her guidance, support, and advocacy for the children added weight to Harry's approach, ensuring that their voices, though young and largely unheard, were represented in a global conversation about fairness and legacy. Meanwhile, inside the palace, reactions ranged from disbelief to quiet panic. Advisors scrambled to contain the story, attempting damage control behind the scenes. There were meetings with communications teams, late-night calls to trusted media contacts, and frantic discussions about how to manage Harry's increasingly visible presence in the narrative. For the first time in years, the palace was reacting to Harry on his own terms, rather than the other way around. And that was a paradigm shift that unsettled even the most seasoned officials. Public response added another layer of complexity. Social media erupted with debates about fairness, equality, and the relevance of ancient royal customs in the modern era. Some hailed Harry as a courageous father, unafraid to speak out for his children. Others criticized him for turning private family matters into public spectacle. The commentary was intense, polarizing, and unrelenting. Every statement, Every gesture was scrutinized. And through it all, Harry remained resolute, maintaining a delicate balance between advocacy and outrage. The tension within the family itself also intensified. Prince William and Catherine, whose son George had been honored, reportedly felt blindsided by the scale and speed of Harry's response. While they may have expected some measure of disappointment or frustration, the public intensity of Harry's actions was unprecedented. It was one thing for a family member to be upset privately. It was another for that frustration to be broadcast worldwide, framing the family narrative in a way that challenged established perceptions. But Harry's reaction wasn't solely about titles or hierarchy. It was about principle, identity, and visibility. He had long struggled with the perception that stepping away from royal duties meant stepping away from significance. Yet this moment crystallized his fears, that despite his efforts to protect his family and build a life outside of tradition, the system still had the power to marginalize his children. His response was as much about asserting their place as it was about confronting the emotional weight of exclusion. And then came the unexpected twist. The one that turned a tense situation into a full-blown media spectacle. An insider revealed that a private message Harry sent, initially intended for a trusted journalist, was leaked to the public. The leak wasn't malicious, it was accidental. But the timing couldn't have been more explosive. In it, Harry's frustration, anger, and unfiltered emotions were laid bare. Phrases describing perceived favoritism, exclusion, and unfairness made headlines instantly, dominating global news cycles. For Harry, this leak was both a complication and an opportunity. His concerns were now undeniable, but the intensity of public scrutiny reached levels he had only prepared for in theory. As the story continued to evolve, it became clear that this wasn't simply a family disagreement. It was a broader cultural conversation. People around the world began asking difficult questions. How relevant are centuries-old royal traditions in modern society? Should children of step-back royals be treated differently? And perhaps most importantly, can a family institution built on hierarchy and protocol coexist with principles of equality and fairness in the 21st century? The emotional stakes for Harry reached a crescendo during this period. Every headline, every social media thread, every news clip served as a reminder of the perceived injustice. And yet, for all the public drama, there was also a private, tender side to his response. Sources report that Harry spent countless hours with Archie and Lilibet, reassuring them, answering their questions in age-appropriate ways, and reinforcing the message that their worth wasn't defined by titles or public recognition. This duality, fierce public advocacy paired with private nurture, highlighted the complexity of Harry's role as both a prince and a father navigating unprecedented circumstances. When the news of Harry's reaction reached Buckingham Palace, it didn't simply cause concern, it ignited a storm behind closed doors. For years, the palace had managed crises with careful precision, maintaining a veneer of calm and continuity. But this situation was different. Unlike other controversies that could be quietly managed or spun in public favor, Harry's emotional, public response cut through the traditional buffers. It exposed vulnerabilities within the royal family, sparked whispered debates among advisors, and revealed the human side of an institution that had long been seen as untouchable. Inside the palace, the corridors buzzed with anticipation and tension. Senior aides convened in hushed meetings, analyzing every detail of Harry's communications. They debated, should they respond publicly or attempt quiet diplomacy? Would confronting Harry escalate the situation, or would silence be seen as weakness? Every option carried risk. Every decision had potential consequences. And as history has shown, mismanaging a single royal scandal could resonate for decades. The palace's communications team, often considered the guardians of royal image, were working around the clock. Every word, every phrase, every statement was scrutinized for tone, impact, and potential backlash. Drafts of statements were written, rewritten, and debated internally. But the challenge was unprecedented. How do you address a grievance that has both personal and public dimensions, when the person at the center of it is not only a former senior royal, but also a global media figure with a fiercely loyal following? Meanwhile, tensions between Harry and his brother William began to simmer more visibly. William, already navigating the pressures of his own duties and public expectations, reportedly felt blindsided by Harry's actions. To him, George's title announcement was a milestone for the family, a continuation of tradition meant to honor the line of succession. But Harry's public frustration reframed the narrative entirely, turning celebration into conflict. The brothers, who had shared both joyful and difficult moments over the years, were suddenly on opposing sides of a very public debate, and the world was watching. Insiders suggest that private conversations between the brothers became increasingly strained. Discussions that once focused on family milestones and shared responsibilities now revolved around fairness, recognition, and perception. Harry argued passionately that Archie and Lilibet were being unfairly excluded from recognition, while William maintained that the rules were clear and grounded in tradition. The tension was personal, emotional, and deeply rooted in decades of family dynamics that few outsiders could fully understand. At the same time, Meghan played a critical role behind the scenes. Known for her strategic thinking and media savvy, she advised Harry on how to navigate the situation while protecting their children. Their discussions reportedly focused on balancing emotional honesty with measured public statements, ensuring that their grievances were heard without appearing combative or sensationalist. Meghan's influence was both subtle and profound. She helped shape the narrative, provided emotional support, and prepared Archie and Lilibet for a world where public perception and family tradition could collide in unexpected ways. The palace's response was equally strategic. While they sought to maintain calm publicly, behind the scenes, there were efforts to manage the optics. Advisors explored how to frame George's title announcement as a celebration of tradition, not a slight against Harry's family. They weighed statements emphasizing continuity, historical precedent, and respect for royal hierarchy. But each move was complicated by Harry's actions, which had already captured global attention. The delicate balance between maintaining authority and avoiding public conflict had been disrupted. And then came the unexpected escalation. An internal source revealed that a senior royal, perhaps acting independently, attempted to reach out to Harry privately. The conversation, intended as a gesture of reconciliation, reportedly had the opposite effect. Rather than calming tensions, it intensified Harry's resolve. He interpreted the gesture not as an olive branch, but as an attempt to contain or control him, further validating his perception that the system was rigged against his children. The media's reaction to these behind-the-scenes dynamics only added fuel to the fire. Rumors of familial rifts, whispered disagreements, and leaked statements dominated headlines and social media platforms worldwide. Analysts debated whether the monarchy could survive another round of internal conflict made public, while the public consumed every detail with fascination and outrage. Harry's reaction, once a private expression of parental frustration, had become a catalyst for global conversation about fairness, tradition, and the evolving role of royalty in modern society. Perhaps the most dramatic aspect of this chapter is how personal and emotional the conflict had become. This was no longer about protocol or ceremonial procedure. It was about identity, loyalty, and recognition. Harry's outrage was rooted in decades of experience, a feeling both privileged and constrained by a system that demanded perfection, loyalty, and silence. For him, Archie and Lilibet represented the future, a chance to redefine what it meant to be a royal in the modern era. Their exclusion was therefore deeply symbolic, a threat not just to their recognition, but to the values Harry hoped to instill in his children. And yet, despite the tension, there were moments of quiet strategy, careful planning, and deliberation. Harry and Meghan weighed every potential move, considering the consequences not only for themselves, but for the broader family. They recognized that the stakes were enormous. Any misstep could deepen divisions, escalate media scrutiny, and affect public perception of the monarchy as a whole. But they also knew that inaction could be interpreted as acceptance of injustice, a message they were unwilling to send to their children. As the days and weeks passed, the atmosphere inside the palace became increasingly tense. Staff whispered in corridors. Advisors debated endlessly. And Harry, though physically distant, was a constant presence in the minds and strategies of those inside. His actions, words, and intentions had disrupted the usual rhythms of the institution, forcing everyone to confront questions that had long been left unspoken. How do you reconcile centuries of tradition with modern notions of fairness? How do you honor the past while acknowledging the present? And perhaps most importantly, can a family institution survive when personal loyalty clashes with systemic expectation? And the cliffhanger leading into Chapter 5? Just when the palace thought they had contained the situation, a single revelation came to light, one that no one anticipated and that had the potential to completely change the dynamics of the dispute. A private message, a leaked conversation, or perhaps a behind-the-scenes maneuver. The source of the escalation was about to emerge, and it would shock both insiders and the public alike. The next chapter would reveal the move that intensified the conflict and pushed the royal family into uncharted territory. In the high-stakes world of royalty, information is power, and timing is everything. But sometimes, even the most carefully guarded secrets slip through the cracks. That is exactly what happened when a private message from Harry, intended for a trusted journalist, somehow became public. The content of that message wasn't just a personal venting. It was an unfiltered expression of outrage, frustration, and raw emotion. And once it hit the press, the ripple effects were instantaneous and explosive. The leak was subtle at first, a quote here, a paraphrased comment there, but within hours, it dominated the global media cycle. Headlines screamed, Prince Harry furious over royal titles snub, and Archie and Lilibet left out while George is honored. Social media erupted, with millions weighing in on fairness, tradition, and the perceived injustice toward Harry's children. Within the palace, the leak was nothing short of a crisis. Advisors scrambled to contain the narrative, senior royals convened emergency meetings, and analysts predicted that this could become one of the most polarizing stories in recent royal history. What made the leak particularly potent was the human emotion it conveyed. This wasn't a dry statement or a calculated press release. It was raw, personal, and deeply relatable. Harry's words painted a picture of a father who saw the system failing his children, and he refused to stay silent. The message resonated with the public because, at its core, it reflected universal themes. The desire for fairness, the protective instincts of parenthood, and the frustration of being sidelined in matters that deeply affect those we love. The media frenzy escalated quickly. International news outlets picked up the story, each framing it with their own angle. Some emphasizing the human drama, others dissecting the constitutional and traditional implications. Social media was ablaze with debate. Hashtags trending across continents, opinion threads hundreds of comments deep, and videos analyzing every word of Harry's message. Public opinion polarized sharply. Some celebrated Harry's courage, praising him for speaking out for his children. Others criticized him, claiming he had turned private family matters into a spectacle. The intensity of reaction was unprecedented, even for the royal family. Inside Buckingham Palace, the leak forced a re-evaluation of strategy. Senior aides debated whether to issue a response or allow the story to play out in public. Every possible move carried risk. A public statement could be seen as defensive or provocative. Silence could be interpreted as tacit agreement with Harry's grievances. Advisors worked around the clock, drafting potential statements, rehearsing press responses, and coordinating with communications teams across the Commonwealth. The situation had become a high-wire act, with each decision weighted by both familial and institutional consequences. The emotional stakes for Harry, meanwhile, continued to mount. He had intended the private message to bring attention to a perceived injustice, but he had not anticipated the scale of global attention. The leak amplified every feeling, frustration, anger, protectiveness, while also introducing the weight of public expectation. For the first time in this conflict, Harry was not only managing his own emotions, but also the expectations and reactions of a worldwide audience, all while shielding his children from the storm. The leak also exposed deeper fissures within the royal family. William and Catherine reportedly felt blindsided, frustrated not only by the content of Harry's message but by the manner in which it had reached the public. The announcement of George's title had been intended as a joyful milestone. Harry's response had reframed it as a confrontation. Private conversations, once manageable within the family, were now broadcast globally, magnifying the tension. The brothers, who had previously navigated challenges with a combination of discretion and familial loyalty, now faced a new reality. The world was watching their disagreements in real time. Amid this chaos, Meghan's role remained central. Known for her media savvy, she worked closely with Harry to control the narrative, ensuring that their children's voices, or rather, their stakes in the story, were represented. She helped craft carefully worded statements, advised on media engagement, and provided emotional support as Harry navigated the dual pressures of personal grievance and public scrutiny. Meghan's influence highlighted a crucial dynamic. While Harry's outrage was authentic, it was also strategically channeled, balancing emotion with intention. But the most surprising aspect of the leak was its unintended consequences. Not only did it escalate tensions within the family, but it also prompted a global discussion about the monarchy itself. Commentators questioned whether a centuries-old institution, steeped in tradition and hierarchy, could coexist with modern values of fairness, equality, and transparency. Every interview, op-ed, and social media post dissected the implications of excluding Archie and Lilibet from recognition. The conversation expanded beyond the family into broader cultural debates: who decides worth, how tradition clashes with modern ethics, and what it means to be recognized in a system built on lineage and protocol. The palace, meanwhile, scrambled to respond strategically. Advisors considered multiple scenarios: private reconciliation, public statement, or carefully crafted media messaging to reassert control. Each option had potential pitfalls. A direct response could inflame Harry further, creating a public feud. Silence could be interpreted as acceptance of his claims. A half-measured statement risked being criticized for evasiveness. The institution found itself navigating uncharted territory, forced to balance family loyalty with public perception, all under intense global scrutiny. And then came the emotional twist that few anticipated. Amid the media storm, Harry focused relentlessly on his children, spending long hours with Archie and Lilibet, helping them understand in age-appropriate terms that the situation was not their fault. Reports describe him reinforcing their worth, shielding them from criticism, and teaching them resilience in the face of perceived exclusion. The personal and the public collided. A father's love contrasted with global headlines. Private reassurance contrasted with public outrage. This duality made the situation all the more compelling, highlighting the human cost behind the drama. As the chapter draws to a close, the cliffhanger emerges. The palace, realizing the leak had destabilized not just public perception but internal dynamics, planned a move that would dramatically escalate the conflict. A decision, carefully timed and strategically executed, was about to force Harry into a position he could not ignore. The next chapter would reveal this move and show how a single decision inside Buckingham Palace had the potential to change the trajectory of the family dispute forever. Just when Harry thought he had captured the narrative and controlled the global conversation, the palace quietly made its move. Unlike the public announcement of George's title or the leaked messages, this was a carefully orchestrated strategy behind the scenes. Advisors, communications experts, and senior royals convened to craft a response designed to reassert authority, manage perception, and subtly remind Harry of the boundaries that still govern the institution he had once belonged to. The palace's escalation wasn't immediate or overt, it was methodical. It began with subtle shifts in public messaging, official statements emphasizing tradition, historical precedents, and the significance of George's title. The language was deliberate, ceremonial, factual, and unemotional. Yet the timing and tone conveyed a clear message. This was the way the monarchy worked, and the rules had not changed. Every word, carefully curated, was a gentle but unmistakable rebuke. At the same time, internal communications ramped up. Senior aides reached out to intermediaries who maintained contact with Harry, attempting to clarify the reasoning behind the decision to honor George and not Archie and Lilibet. These conversations were meant to be conciliatory, but Harry interpreted them differently. From his perspective, the palace wasn't extending an olive branch. It was policing boundaries, reinforcing hierarchy, and reminding him that stepping outside the traditional framework came with consequences. His response was immediate and uncompromising. Harry's anger, already simmering from the initial announcement and the leaked message, intensified. Reports describe him as both furious and determined, unwilling to let perceived injustice go unchallenged. Every statement from the palace, every carefully timed release, seemed to confirm what he already felt. The system favored tradition over fairness, bloodline over merit, and public perception over parental equality. And he was not about to accept that for his children. The palace, of course, was fully aware of the stakes. Advisors debated how to maintain control while avoiding escalation that could further damage the institution's reputation. They considered multiple options: private reconciliation, strategic media responses, or even leveraging sympathetic voices in the press to frame Harry's actions as emotional but misplaced. But every choice carried risk. Publicly confronting Harry could ignite a feud, while silence risked allowing the narrative to spiral out of control. And so, the tension escalated. Harry and Meghan, operating from across the Atlantic, responded with calculated intensity. Rather than reacting impulsively to every palace maneuver, they strategically amplified the narrative surrounding Archie and Lilibet's exclusion. Carefully timed media interviews, charitable appearances, and subtle social media messaging reinforced the perception that the children were being overlooked, while also emphasizing themes of fairness, family, and equality. The public began to see Harry not as a rebellious prince, but as a protective father challenging an entrenched system. This escalation revealed the fragility of even the most historically stable institutions. The monarchy had long relied on discretion, hierarchy, and controlled messaging. But Harry's response, amplified by global media and social platforms, disrupted the careful balance. Suddenly, the palace was reacting to him on his terms, rather than shaping the narrative themselves. Every announcement, every statement, every carefully curated image was now interpreted through the lens of this growing conflict. Within the palace walls, the strain was palpable. Private meetings grew tense, advisors whispered in hallways, and senior royals navigated a delicate dance between maintaining authority and avoiding public embarrassment. The dynamic between Harry and William, already strained, became a focal point of discussion. While both brothers had once shared close bonds, the public confrontation over George's title and the subsequent leak had transformed their relationship. Family loyalty was being tested against institutional expectation, and every move was scrutinized by both insiders and the global audience. Meghan's influence remained a key factor. Her strategic guidance ensured that Harry's public stance remained controlled yet assertive. She emphasized the importance of protecting their children while also highlighting the inequities in the system. Interviews and appearances were carefully timed to maintain narrative momentum without appearing reactionary. This dual approach, emotional advocacy coupled with strategic positioning, reinforced Harry's public image as both a devoted father and a principled challenger to outdated tradition. But the palace escalation wasn't limited to messaging. Sources indicate that behind closed doors, advisors explored subtle structural measures to reaffirm the hierarchy. These ranged from adjustments in ceremonial protocol to strategic placement of information in official channels. Each move was calculated to signal authority, maintain control, and reassert that, despite Harry's efforts, the traditional system remained intact. For Harry, these maneuvers were not just procedural, they were deeply personal. Every strategic decision, no matter how understated, felt like a challenge to his role as a father and advocate for his children. The global reaction added further intensity. News outlets dissected palace communications, analyzing subtle cues and reading between the lines. Social media users debated the fairness of titles, the relevance of tradition, and the morality of excluding Archie and Lilibet. Commentators framed the story as a larger battle between modern values and ancient institutions, and public interest soared. Harry's strategic response, combined with the palace's careful escalation, created a perfect storm of attention, debate, and speculation. And then, as tensions reached a critical point, a surprising development occurred. An unexpected intermediary reached out to Harry with a proposal, a potential path toward resolution or at least temporary de-escalation. But, as insiders would later reveal, the offer was loaded with conditions, subtle restrictions, and implicit messages about loyalty, obedience, and the limits of familial influence. Harry, already determined to assert his children's place, interpreted the proposal as a challenge rather than an opportunity. The emotional stakes were now higher than ever. The palace had escalated, the media had intensified scrutiny, and Harry was resolute in his conviction that Archie and Lilibet deserved recognition. What had begun as a simple announcement about George's title had transformed into a multi-layered conflict encompassing family dynamics, institutional authority, public perception, and global debate about fairness and tradition. The tension had reached a breaking point. George's title announcement, the leaked messages, the palace's strategic maneuvers, all of it had escalated into a complex, high-stakes drama. And then, Harry made a decision that would shock insiders, the public, and perhaps even his own family. It was not impulsive. It was calculated, deliberate, and fueled by a deep-seated desire to assert his children's place in a system that had, so far, overlooked them. Sources confirm that Harry's move was unprecedented in modern royal history. He reached out directly to influential media outlets with an exclusive, carefully crafted statement. But this wasn't just a press release or a defensive message. It was a direct challenge to the narrative, framed around fairness, parental love, and the principle that Archie and Lilibet deserved recognition equal to their cousins. The statement was brief in length, but monumental in impact. Every word, every phrase, every subtle implication was designed to provoke, inform, and force the world to see the situation from his perspective. The global reaction was immediate. Within hours, headlines splashed across continents. Prince Harry breaks silence on royal titles snub, and Archie and Lilibet deserve recognition, says Harry. Social media exploded. Millions engaged with the story, sharing opinions, debating traditions, and analyzing every nuance of Harry's message. Commentators praised his courage, while critics accused him of airing private family matters in public. The drama was no longer contained to the palace corridors. It was now a worldwide conversation about fairness, tradition, and parental advocacy. Inside Buckingham Palace, the move triggered panic. Advisors convened emergency meetings to assess the implications. Senior royals were reportedly furious, not only at the content of Harry's statement, but at the audacity of his public challenge. The palace had carefully managed perception for centuries, but Harry had bypassed every filter, using his platform to frame the narrative on his own terms. Every attempt at control seemed ineffective, and the internal tension escalated rapidly. Harry's statement also resonated deeply with the public, particularly parents and families who saw in his words a reflection of universal concerns: fairness, recognition, and protecting one's children. His argument was simple yet compelling. If George could be celebrated, why could Archie and Lilibet not receive the same acknowledgement? The question struck at the heart of modern perceptions of justice and equality, and it forced both supporters and critics of the monarchy to reconsider their assumptions. The palace's reaction was multifaceted. On one hand, they worked to contain the fallout, emphasizing tradition, hierarchy, and the historical rationale behind George's title. On the other hand, behind closed doors, discussions intensified about how to address Harry's unprecedented public challenge. Advisors debated whether to respond privately, issue a public statement, or let the controversy play out. Every option carried risks. A public confrontation could further inflame tensions, while silence could be seen as weakness or tacit approval of Harry's grievances. Meanwhile, Harry and Meghan continued to navigate the situation with strategic precision. They amplified their message through interviews, charitable appearances, and subtle social media cues, reinforcing the principle that their children's exclusion was unfair. Yet they remained careful to balance emotion with intentionality, ensuring the narrative emphasized parental love and fairness rather than personal attacks. Their approach resonated with global audiences, further strengthening Harry's position as both a principled father and a challenger to entrenched tradition. The palace, however, was not about to yield. Sources reveal that senior royals engaged in behind-the-scenes negotiations, reaching out to intermediaries and trusted advisors in an attempt to de-escalate the situation. The goal was to remind Harry that, while his voice was influential, the institution had centuries of precedent and authority on its side. But the tension was palpable. Harry's move had fundamentally altered the dynamics of the family, creating a public confrontation that could no longer be contained within private walls. As the drama unfolded, public fascination reached new heights. Analysts dissected Harry's statement, evaluating every phrase for hidden meaning, potential consequences, and implications for the monarchy's future. Opinion pieces debated whether his actions represented a necessary challenge to outdated traditions or a reckless escalation that could damage family unity. Social media was a battleground of perspectives. Some defended his stance as courageous and principled, while others criticized him for turning private matters into public spectacle. The emotional stakes were equally high for Harry and Meghan. While the statement was a calculated move, it was also deeply personal. It represented years of accumulated frustration, the desire to protect their children, and a refusal to accept exclusion as inevitable. Reports describe long conversations between Harry and Meghan, strategizing about timing, content, and potential repercussions. Every detail was considered, from wording choices to interview platforms, ensuring that the message conveyed both authority and empathy. And yet, even amid the chaos, there were moments of tenderness and reflection. Harry reportedly spent significant time with Archie and Lilibet, reassuring them that their worth was not defined by titles, recognition, or public opinion. These private moments contrasted sharply with the public spectacle, highlighting the human dimension behind the royal drama. It was a delicate balance, fighting for fairness on a global stage while nurturing and protecting the children at the center of the controversy. The cliffhanger leading into Chapter 8 is striking. Just as the palace prepared its next move, an unexpected ally emerged, someone whose influence could dramatically shift the balance of power. This development was entirely unanticipated and promised to escalate tensions even further. The next chapter would reveal the identity of this ally and how their involvement transformed the conflict into a new, high-stakes battle for recognition, power, and family loyalty. Just when the palace believed it had the situation contained, an unexpected figure entered the fray, someone whose influence, connections, and strategic positioning would dramatically shift the balance of power. This ally was neither a royal insider nor a distant observer. They were someone who commanded attention, shaped public opinion, and could amplify Harry's message in ways the palace had not anticipated. Their emergence changed the game entirely. Sources reveal that this ally had long-standing relationships within media, politics, and social circles closely linked to global influence. They recognized the gravity of Harry's position. A father fighting for his children's recognition while navigating centuries-old hierarchies that seemed designed to exclude him. With a combination of discretion, strategy, and timing, this figure offered Harry the leverage to elevate his cause, amplify the message about Archie and Lilibet, and challenge the system on a global scale. The palace, naturally, was blindsided. Up until this point, their strategy had relied on controlling communications, containing leaks, and emphasizing historical precedent. They did not anticipate a high-profile ally capable of reframing the narrative entirely. Suddenly, Harry was no longer isolated. He had access to channels that could bypass traditional royal messaging and bring global attention directly to his grievances. The implications were immediate and profound. Who was this ally? While identities remain partly confidential, insiders hint at a mix of influential media contacts, sympathetic public figures, and advisors skilled in managing high-profile crises. Collectively, they provided Harry with not only strategic advice, but also the means to ensure that Archie and Lilibet's exclusion could not be ignored. Their support extended beyond messaging. They offered a network capable of shaping public perception, influencing media narratives, and even indirectly pressuring palace communications teams to reconsider their approach. With this ally's assistance, Harry began a series of carefully orchestrated moves. Interviews were arranged with global news outlets, highlighting the perceived injustice in a tone that balanced emotion, principle, and parental advocacy. Statements were strategically timed to coincide with major media cycles, maximizing attention while minimizing the risk of appearing reactionary. Social media posts subtly reinforced the narrative, encouraging public engagement and discussion. The effect was immediate. The conversation shifted from private family disagreement to global debate over fairness, tradition, and the future of monarchy. The palace's reaction was predictable but urgent. Senior advisors convened emergency sessions, attempting to anticipate the Allies' influence and counteract Harry's momentum. Internal communications emphasized loyalty, discretion, and adherence to protocol, but the public's attention had already moved to Harry's side of the story. Analysts inside the palace noted that this ally had amplified the perceived power imbalance. Harry, once a figure constrained by royal tradition, now had tools to assert influence in ways that could no longer be ignored. The emotional stakes for Harry intensified. With the Allies' guidance, he was not only advocating for his children, but also strategically framing the discussion around modern values of fairness and equality. Every move was calculated to show that Archie and Lilibet deserved recognition equal to George, without directly attacking the institution or its other members. It was a delicate balance, assertive advocacy tempered with careful diplomacy, emotion infused with strategic calculation. Meanwhile, the media frenzy escalated further. Headlines tracked Harry's actions in real time. Harry gains powerful ally in battle for Archie and Lilibet. Royal conflict escalates with unseen influencer, and palace scrambles as Harry challenges tradition. Social media conversations exploded, with millions weighing in on the fairness of royal titles, parental advocacy, and systemic bias.